podium. There's no fucking podium in a powerlifting meet. When's the last time you saw a fucking podium? You walk up to a table and they give you a trophy with no fucking... The trophy doesn't even say first, second, or third. It's like, go pick your award off the table.
Yeah, they
don't even hand you the award. Fucking podium. There's no podium.
When choosing max effort movements and supplemental movements for both strength sport athletes and team sport athletes, how does your exercise pool differ? So between a team sport athlete and we'll say kind of a intermediate lifter, it would pretty much be the same. I would get them good at wide stance squatting, which will usually take about 6 weeks or so, and then after that we'll start rotating in some close stance work, so they're stronger at more angles than just one. We want them strong at a lot of different positions, and also start rotating in some good mornings every once in a while and a pull maybe every third week. Again, to try to get them stronger in more angles instead of just one spot. And then for upper body, we could go on that same question. I typically like to rotate every other week a full range movement and partial range movement. The only time I really go partial range movement on the lower body would be a pin pull. I'm not a fan of high box squats or anything like that, or a block pull variation. But yeah, so the upper body stuff I would rotate full range, partial range every other week. And I usually try to use accommodating resistance if I can, whether it's an athlete or just plain lifter. If you could only train with chains for accommodating resistance forever or bands forever, which would you choose and why? I would choose bands because I think you get a bigger training effect from them. So if I was stuck on a desert island with a monolift and bar and bands, I would take bands, and then what I would do is I would just rotate them in and out with straight weight. But then when I needed to be my strongest or fastest, I would add the bands in.
If I was stuck on a desert island and had to choose between the both, I would choose chains, because those bands is only going to work as a slingshot. Chains I can sling around, whack people in the head, train my core, and get all kinds of stabilization work.
Bands you can slingshot coconuts and kill animals with, though.
That's a tough one. You got the chains. Bands are also lighter, so you can travel more effectively.
Yeah.
But the chains, you might be able to rub them together to get a spark. Go to fire.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Well, I don't know if you can even do that. I'm not much of a survivalist, so.
Maybe we can road trip to a desert island next.
Yeah. I don't know if I was really stranded on a desert island if I'd really worry about chains or bands, but you can tie people up with bands too. But you could fucking do some serious damage with the chains. And who gives a shit what your abs look like on a desert island?
True. You're gonna have abs either way because you're gonna be starving and skinny as shit.
Yeah. Beetles and bugs only go so far.
Yeah, how's that, like the Survivor shows? They go through all this effort to eat some bugs. Is it really even worth it? Like, how much is a bug calorie-wise? 0.25? How important is jump training for powerlifting? I know Louis suggests at least 40 jumps twice a week. Do you think there should be more or less? Any other thoughts? I know a decent amount of powerlifters, and not one of those motherfuckers does jump training. Maybe Louis has his guys do it, but I don't know many powerlifters that do jump training, to be honest. For athletes, yeah, I always like to try to work up to 40 jumps twice a week. But you're not always going to get there, and it depends where you're at in your season and stuff. But we did see a difference with our athletes when we pushed up the jump volume. But like I said, you're not always going to be able to get there because that's a decent amount of jumps. So you're not going to do 80 jumps a week with an in-season athlete. But yeah, not many lifters I know do them very often.
That's one of those areas that we weren't doing when I was at Westside that they're doing now. So I really can't comment on that a whole lot as far as what Louis does and what Westside does with that. We did a little bit, but not any type of consistent basis. I have used jumps with the lifters that I've worked with, but not in the same regard as what most people would. I like to find out how long a lifter can maintain that dynamic explosive component without training it, because in certain instances I've had to remove that before a meet just because they were either a geared lifter and they needed more time in the gear, or I had to push up the maximum strength more because they were a little bit behind for one reason or another. And what I found is with most lifters I've worked with, they can get away from dynamic work for about 4 weeks before I start to see a drop in force when they lift the bar or any type of drop in strength. But I can extend that a couple 2-3 more weeks if I have some type of jump in for the squat. So instead of the dynamic squat day of actually doing the dynamic squats, I would put in a jump variation, which could be a box squat to a jump or just a straight jump. In both cases, stepping down, not jumping down. And I use Prelpin's chart for that. Now, being that it is a jump, I will max them out on the jump to kind of see where they are, so I know what their 100% is, and then base the speed work either on 3s or 5s, using Prelpin's chart to determine what they're going to do with that. For the bench training, when I have to back that off, I'll usually back it off of the barbell onto a tsunami bar, but I won't do, or med ball throws, but I won't do plyometric push-ups. So that's kind of how I implement it, and it's not very often. It's usually because, say we're dealing with a shoulder injury or some type of injury that makes it uncomfortable for them to squat twice a week, so I can still get the explosive component, or as I said before, they're peaking for a meet and I have to, for whatever reasons I'm seeing at that time, pull out the dynamic work to be able to focus on other qualities.
Should novice lifters use bands and chains? When does it make sense to add those?
In 10 miles, take the exit onto O117 towards O366.
There's our GPS. So for lifters, I would typically wait, this is me personally, typically probably wait a little longer until I implemented those. Because when I think of a lifter, I think of someone who's going to be doing this more long term, more of a marathon type situation. Where an athlete, I always like to put that stuff in as soon as the athlete was proficient at the movement that we were training. So once their squats look pretty good and their bench look pretty good, or deadlifts or speed pulls or whatever, we would start putting them in. We would just scale it down to their strength levels. It's like a 200-pound squatter. As long as their squats look good and they could accelerate straight weight, we would start using like a mini band for a 200-pound squatter, like on their box squat. And my thought was, we only have them for so long. Why not introduce the training stimulus that's going to help them get us to the end goal quicker? Whereas like a lifter, I'm thinking they're going to be more long term, and you kind of slow cook their progress a little bit. So that's kind of how we did that.
When you say novice, I think my definition of novice is going to be a beginner, and I've worked with Gen Pop population. I spent a decade working with that, so that's immediately where my mind goes with that. So I want to define that before I put the answer out. I always found when working with that population, all technical work on the squat or the bench press would be with a broomstick, and the goal is obviously to get them up to a barbell. Once you got them from the broomstick to the barbell, and the technique as well, there's a little transitional period in there that's a little funky when you start working up dimes, 5s. It's kind of between the barbell and the 95 pounds, which is, it's just a weird point. They don't really have the coordination yet to do the movement well, and they certainly don't have the neuromuscular coordination to do the movement with any kind of synchronization. With them, I would go back down to the broomstick, or a 20-pound bar, a lighter bar, and I would put a little bit of band on, not a lot, just enough of the band so when they stood up with the squat, they had to make their body tight immediately. because one of the hardest things to teach a novice is how to get their body tight under load. It's super hard. You can push on them, you can try to move them, and it's super hard. But you put a band on there and they stand up immediately, they're tight. The second thing that's really hard to teach a novice is how to stand up with any type of force or compensatory acceleration, or just basically what I would call lifting weights properly. When you have a little bit of band on there and they sit down, pause on a box, they go to stand up, usually they'll come about halfway up and go right back down. And then they'll stand right up super fast. So I use it more as a training aid from that standpoint to help reinforce the technique a little bit faster than I would just with verbal cues or trying to use balance type of work to push them up.
There's some dumb fucking questions on here.
The dumb ones are good though.
Which do you guys prefer in powerlifting? Athletes getting the podium finishes or records? Just make progress, like work on personal records. But then when you're at your big meet or your big competition, that's when you want to get the podium. That's what I would say. That could go for any athlete.
I remember years ago, I forget which meet it was, but it was one of the IPA national meets, and I traveled to the meet with Louie and Rob Fusner, and we were all chilling out in the hotel room, and the topic came up of, what's more important, breaking a PR or winning. And I was under the mindset of it, I wanted a fucking PR. I didn't come there for anything other than a fucking PR. And Rob said, I want to win. And I'm like, dude, even if you lifted less on all three of your lifts than your best and won, compared to adding 20 to 30 pounds on each one of your lifts and not placing at all, you would rather win. And he said, yes, I would rather win because I can't fucking stand to lose no matter what. And I realized right then I had to change my mindset, because it is a competitive sport. It still is a competitive sport, and PRs are important, and PRs are kind of what drive you. But I think we're in an age now where everybody has 10,000 fucking PRs. I have about 5 things that I consider PRs that I track. If every time you go into the gym you're breaking a PR, that's called training, that's called progress. You don't celebrate the simple shit in the day-to-day work that you're supposed to fucking be doing. It's not like every time an employee clocks out, everybody should give them a high five because they went and did their fucking job for the day. So I learned a lot that day, and I also learned why Rob was a better competitor than I was. He hated to lose far more than what I did, and that was something that I've seen consistently in the people who do break all-time world records, the people who do actually end up winning all the time. To them, it's always been more about winning than it is PRs. That's not telling you how you're supposed to think. All I'm telling you is don't bitch and complain when you get beat by the guy that only cares about winning and all you care about is a PR. Don't fucking complain about it if that's not the choice that you made. Podium. There's no fucking podium in a powerlifting meet. When's the last time you saw a fucking podium? You walk up to a table and they give you a trophy with no fucking... The trophy doesn't even say first, second, or third. It's like, go pick your award off the table.
Yeah, they
don't even hand you the award. Fucking podium. There's no podium.
Or your sword or your trophy.
Yeah, go grab a sword or trophy, whatever you want. Take your pick.